Welcome to the Mid-America Region Program, a monthly gathering and training for our members of congregational boards serving in our congregations throughout the region. I'm the Reverend Dr. Matthew Johnson. I'm one of your congregational life consultants. I work with pastoral sized congregations. I'm based in Rockford, Illinois. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a middle-aged white man with gray and brown beard and glasses and a green sweater, and in my apartment here with a ceiling fan and books and a statue and a door to the hallway behind me. It's good to be with you tonight. And tonight's gathering is an opportunity for all of us to practice some of the key leadership skills that are so important for our thriving together in our congregations. And so I'll ask you to lean into those skills in your interactions with each other this evening and suggest the following group norms, which Chanel is going to put into the chat for us to take a look at as ways that we are together. To take care of yourself, to share by choice, to share the time, to speak from your own experience, to expect multiple perspectives, to pause for repair when needed, to make room for joy and laughter and growth and curiosity and sadness and silence, and to honor confidentiality, particularly in the breakout groups that we're in together. A few administrative notes: we'll be recording portions of the program when we're together in the large group tonight. So if you don't want to be recorded for those, you can turn off your camera when we're in the large group. And we'll go into breakout groups based on your congregational size with your Congregations in America primary contact as the facilitator. So if you haven't done so already and you don't already have the size, please do rename yourself so we've got the size at the front. And thank you and welcome. And we're glad that you're here this evening. I'll turn over to my colleague, Kiana Dene.
6 years in, I know how to unmute. I'm proud of that. My name is Kiana Dene. It's always both parts like Marianne or Linda Susan. I'm an African American woman in a tight sweater. Sorry about that, with a little green poking out. I have on colorful glasses and a headband, and you may see my locks, which fall out the back of my uh, shirt. Um, Sometimes when you re-hit the link, it reloads itself. I apologize, y'all. It was all set up till I hit a button. Um, Your other uh, your other UUA staff will introduce themselves throughout the program, but I want to lift up and thank Chanel and Amy Kent from the event team for serving as our tech host tonight. We will see Chanel in the chat, and you can message them privately if you need any tech support at any time during the night. I invite you to settle into this space with our chalice reading. If you have a chalice nearby, please feel free to light it. We prepare for the future. These words come from Robin F. Gray. We prepare for the future. By the light of this chalice, we prepare for the future. We prepare ourselves for the times of triumph and the times of trial that might come. We prepare ourselves to be present to one another with loving hearts, even in the most difficult times. We prepare ourselves to make the connections that will lift us out of our isolation and prepare the path for justice and equality.
Thanks, Kiana Dene. Hi, good evening. My name is Lauren Wyeth. My pronouns are she or they, and I'm a white person in my mid-50s with curlyish, blondish brown hair and tortoiseshell glasses. Tonight I'm wearing a sweater that can't decide whether it's spring or winter. It is shades of blue and green and white. And I'm in my attic office in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with a chalice that needs to be lit behind me on one side and a bulletin board over my other shoulder. I serve on your congregational life staff and work with our large congregations. We will soon be heading into our first breakout groups, but we invite you, before we do that, to take a moment to reflect and let us know about trends and themes you're noticing in your congregation using this form that you'll find linked in the chat, thanks to Chanel. We invite you to engage in this practice each time we gather. It's a time for you to have a little moment of reflection about what's moving in your congregation. Sometimes it's moving so fast, it's hard to take a breath and notice. And your responses will help us, your primary contacts, respond to your needs and will inform your Mid-America team of trends and themes in our region as they emerge and evolve. So please follow that link. Take a moment to share your reflections. We'll have a minute of silence as you do that. Okay, thank you, friends. We're going to head into those breakout groups for 10 or 12 minutes. We'll be returning here at 10 till the hour. And in your breakout group, you'll be invited to introduce yourself and share a bit about the themes and trends that you noted.
So welcome everyone, and thank you all for coming back to another edition of our Congregational Board Members Gathering. My name is David Pyle. I am the regional lead for the Mid-America region of the UUA, and I am a light-skinned, white-identified man in my early 50s with hair that I like to pretend is more blonde than gray, and blue eyes, and I am in my home office in Oak Grove, Kentucky. Behind me is a futon and some books and a chancel banner that was a gift to me from the last congregation I served as a minister in Ventura, California. It's beautiful to have you all with us again. And for this time, for us talking about what's really a two-part of session. So we'll be doing this both this month and next month in April. We're going to be talking about planning for the future. This month, we're going to talk a lot about content and overall planning. And then next month, we're going to take the opportunity to really teach one particular planning method that congregational boards can utilize that is known as the 3-year rolling strategic planning process. So let's begin. As a reminder, about this workshop series. Each month we're going to explore a different topic of board leadership, with this month not being congregational assessment. I didn't put a slide, being planning for the future. Each month we'll have a short presentation by me and the group discussion based on congregational size. And most of the material can be found in multiple places, including the Board Basics course and the Board Foundations course and UUA Leader Lab. And you can also take, we recommend the UU Institute course titled UU Board Foundations. So remember last month, we talked about congregational assessment. We talked about how a board knows how well the ministries and the operations of the congregation are doing, how well the congregation is fulfilling the mission of the congregation, how well the congregation is building the fiduciary assets that allow the congregation to fulfill the mission. And we said explicitly that is to be able to give the board the ability to then guide good planning for how to fulfill that mission long term. And so when I think of planning for congregations, I think of two different categories, and I'm going to introduce these now, and we'll work with them throughout the entirety of our workshop time today. The first one is operational ministry planning, and these are explicitly the planning that a congregation needs to do to fulfill the mission over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to give you lots of examples of what this looks like in different congregational settings, but the second is long-range planning. And long-range planning is, while the operational ministry planning is really closely tied to the congregation's mission, long-range planning is tied to the congregation's vision and its fiduciary assets. So kind of a shorthand way to think of these two understandings of the different categories of planning that congregations do. Operational ministry planning is about what we do. And long-range planning is about what we have to do it with, right? And making sure that we have what we need to do the ministries of the congregation for the long term. So one of the things that I'm a big proponent of, and this is part of why we're taking all of the April session to talk about the 3-year rolling planning process, is I am a big proponent of continuous operational planning processes, and occasionally using continual planning processes for your long-range planning as well. And the reason for this is that the pace of congregational life has just increased over the last decade and a half or so. That, when I became a district executive for the Joseph Priestley District, joined UUA staff 12 years ago, our standard practice was that congregations did 5-year static, we didn't call it static back then, but 5-year strategic plans. And what would happen is that the board would, or even the congregational annual meeting, would appoint or elect a group of people that would then do this huge effort to survey the congregation, to look at the possibilities that the congregation was looking for in ministry, to have deep conversations with the staff, to deep conversations even with the UUA staff and others, to then produce a big static document that was the congregation's 5-year strategic plan. And I found that these documents had two primary purposes. Now, the conversations that went into them, the conversations that the congregation had about mission and purpose and what people's dreams for the congregations were, and even looking at ways that the congregation needed to adapt their own infrastructure and practices to be able to fulfill that mission, that was really useful. But the plan itself, reporting out on all the things that the congregation had discussed and talked about, that plan itself primarily ended up with two purposes. The first purpose was to apply for a Chalice Ladder grant, because at least in the district where I was district executive, there was a requirement you have a 5-year strategic plan to be able to apply for a Chalice Ladder grant. The second one was that 3 to 4 years down the road, somebody would find that plan, pull it off the proverbial shelf, sometimes a real shelf, sometimes a digital one, look at it and feel guilty about all the things that they had not accomplished. And the reason why is because the pace of congregations moved past the plan. So you're going to find in this workshop, in this session tonight, a real bias from me for continuous planning processes. And I'm just going to own that bias from the beginning. The pace of congregational life requires that the congregation not put that strategic plan up on the shelf, but have a process in place that lets the congregation regularly do planning. We'll talk about a few of those ways to do that this tonight, and then all of next session will be on a particular practice of continuous planning for the future for a congregation. The other thing that I wanted to highlight about continuous planning processes is that, like everything else we have talked about in these sessions, everything is rooted in the congregation's mission. And the planning is primarily either done by or overseen by the board and the staff. And the reason for that doesn't mean the board has to do all the planning. Sometimes boards choose to, as a core aspect of a board's work. But the board has the responsibility for setting the standards by which that planning is going to happen, and then to have appoint the planning teams and have oversight and be the ones that receive, refine, and approve what planning is being done, both long-range planning, but also a more operational ministry continuous planning. Because it's the board and the staff that have the most developed understanding of the congregation's mission. We talked in earlier sessions about the board's role in mission, vision, discernment, and mission development, and about how that mission then leads to the board's ability to do good fiduciary responsibility to ensure the assets of the congregation are being utilized for the fulfillment of the mission, and that policy is in place to be able to ensure that fiduciary responsibility. And that from that missional understanding to be able to do good congregational assessment to assess where the congregation, how well the congregation is at fulfilling that mission. So all of that rooted in mission leads to the need for the congregation's planning, both long range and operational short-term planning, to be also rooted in the understanding of the mission. And the two bodies that are most familiar with the congregation's lived understanding of its purpose, of what it's trying to accomplish in the world, should be the board and the staff. And so the board and the staff partner together in being able to do the planning for the congregation. So what is the role of the governing board in planning? The board's responsible for the overall process and ensuring that there is ongoing planning, operational or ministry planning for the congregation. Now, sometimes, like I said, this means the board makes the planning process a central part of the board work. And the boards that do that, there are some practices and skills for how to do that well. Other times it means the board may name a standing committee of the board or task the staff with ongoing operational planning. So just know that it either way, the board is ultimately responsible for planning for the future of the congregation based upon the congregation's mission. And so what then is the role of the staff? Um, I searched for clip art for staff, and it gave me this wizard that just reminds me of a bunch of UU ministers in their robes. So I went ahead and put that one up there. But it came out because the wizard has a staff. What is the role of the staff? Staff members are primary sources of information for any planning process, any both operational and also long range planning. Sometimes staff are directly tasked by the board to be able to do planning specifically for their areas of ministry. They may not be the ones approving the planning, but doing the actual work of developing and drafting and the research, that may be staff work in some congregations. And also, staff are almost always, not always, but almost always the primary implementers of whatever congregational planning the operational planning the congregation does. And so having them deeply involved, both through the senior staff leader, be that the minister or your congregation, whoever that senior staff leader is, and staff are not usually responsible for maintaining the process of planning. That's usually a board responsibility. And I want to say something here that I don't often say. Usually want to talk about staff. Sometimes the smaller congregations say we don't have staff, so this part doesn't apply to us. I think almost all congregations have staff. The question is whether or not you're paying them, right? Volunteer staff are a thing that lots of congregations have, especially small congregations. When I was a member of a 100-member lay-led fellowship in Galveston, Texas, I functioned as volunteer staff before they started paying me like a year later. So just know that how you conceive of those who dedicate their time and talent can be very staff-like, even if they are not currently, on a payroll with the congregation. So what is the role of the congregation and of congregational lay leaders in a congregation's planning process? Those that are not directly involved in, say, a standing committee on planning that the board has set up, or those that are not on the board, are also primary sources of information for creating, developing, and assessing operational ministry planning. And that doesn't mean you're just going to them and asking them what they would like for the future of the congregation. You can ask them to do research. You can invite congregational members to be part of the planning process, not just by sharing of their own understanding of the mission, but of asking them to go and research what other congregations are doing. There are ways to invite significant portions of the congregation to be able to be part of a planning process, even if they're not on whatever the committee or board is that's primarily responsible for putting all that research and information together into a plan, into the congregation's planning. The other way that congregational members are deeply involved is for the board and the staff, but the board in this case, to be particularly engaging the congregation members on refining the board's understanding of the congregation's mission. Remember when we talked about using open and powerful questions as a board to be able to deepen your own understanding of the congregation's mission amongst each other and of what's important and what is the congregation's purpose and what is the needs it serves. Well, you can take that same technique or World Cafe or many of the other techniques out to the congregation, and the congregation participating in the congregational assessment process by participating in World Cafe during a coffee hour. That is them participating in the planning process, because all of that information is what your planning team, be it the board or a standing committee or a task force, is going to utilize to be able to develop the plan for the congregation's future, especially on operational and ministry planning. And congregation and ministry and lay leaders are the primary implementers of the plan, of whatever the plan is. We, the people of the congregation, we, the members of the congregation, we do the ministries of the congregation. Often led by staff, not always, especially in some of our smaller congregations. Non-board member lay leaders are often charged with long-term planning processes to develop and maintain the resources. So we'll talk specifically about that in a few minutes. But when we're talking the fiduciary responsibility to develop the resources, the assets of the congregation for the long-term fulfillment of the mission, that will often be specific lay leaders in specific committees or teams within the congregation. So I'm going to give a quick outline here, and then I'm going to ask you all to put something in the chat. So some of the different kinds of types of congregational planning that we see, missional operational planning, but that's we'll go deeper into what that is in a minute. But that is planning for doing the ministries that will fulfill the mission of the congregation, and planning for creating the resources and the structures that will allow the congregation to fulfill the mission of the congregation for the short term, 3 to 5 years. Financial planning. Congregations, there's lots of congregations right now doing some significant financial planning. Resource planning beyond finances. Long-term building maintenance planning. If there is a thing that I am an evangelist for in Unitarian Universalism, it is long-term building maintenance plans, 20-year horizon at least. Stewardship and giving planning, staffing planning, community covenant planning. And what I mean by that is, how are we as a congregation going to be in covenant with the wider community that we are a part of? How do we plan for developing those relationships over a period of time? And I put question marks in there because I want to ask you, you can name some of these if you've seen them, but what I would love to ask you is to put in the chat, what are some of the types of planning that you have experienced in your congregation conducting during your time as a member? What kind of planning have you seen or experienced? We'll give a moment for people to put something in the chat. Mission planning, says Eric. Kinds of hands-on resources are available to help with, say, a 20-year facility plan. That's a conversation that you should reach out to your primary contact to talk about. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I'll give, while people are typing, I'll say, roofs have lifespans. Boilers have lifespans. You can get a lifespan on your floor. You know, contractors can tell you about how long you have before something's likely to need major maintenance. If you have that built into a plan, you can then do fiduciary financial planning against that to make sure that the resources are available to meet those needs when they happen, right? So some of the others, ministerial search, yeah, that takes a huge amount of planning, and the UUA helps you with that, but not all the way, right? The Transitions Handbook is helpful. It's a general plan, but you got to create your own congregational one. Transitions plans, strategic plans, covenant development, long-range capital expenses, mission planning. So keep putting some more in the chat, but I wanted you to see that we do planning. You cannot keep an institution like a congregation going without planning. And the thing that this workshop and next weekend is about is, how do we do that intentionally? As a regular part of our practice as a congregation whose process, at least, is led by the board. So I'm going to go a little deeper into what operational mission planning is, and then we'll go a little deeper into what long-range planning is. So operational mission planning is focused on the what we do of fulfilling the congregation's mission. It is planning for how we're going to develop more space within our sanctuary. It is planning for how we are going to, develop our communications over a period of time. It is planning for staffing, right? It is planning for this cool ministry idea to move to having a Wednesday night reflective worship service, right? Or whatever it is, planning for the youth trip to Boston, although or wherever that may be. Operational planning is the what we do, and planning for that. I like to teach it on a 3-year timeline, because you can project out with some level of awareness in the current world about 2 years. Planning beyond 2 years starts to fade in its relevance because of a changing situation. And so if you've got 2 years of implementable or close to implementable plan, and then 1 year that's just basically, some skeleton. That is a 3 to 5 year timeline or horizon. That kind of operational planning beyond 5 years is something that someone will pull off a shelf after 5 years and will feel guilty that your congregation never accomplished. And and a lot of people put dreams. I did one planning process with a congregation where someone added into the planning process the idea for a carillon, one of those bell towers. And it would have taken the congregation 15 to 20 years to be able to raise the money to put that in and then go through the construction costs. That's not an appropriate piece for an operational planning timeline. Maybe a long-term building development, but not for an operational planning time, 3 to 5 year horizon. I believe operational ministry planning is the responsibility of the board. That the board is responsible for the process and approval. They can delegate some of it to staff or to a board standing committee, but the board holds responsibility for planning for the congregation's future because the board is the lay leader is most aware of the congregation's mission. And it can include elements of planning within other ministry and operational groups within the congregation. So what I mean is your religious education committee may have developed with your religious educator a curriculum plan. You include that in the overall operational planning for the congregation as part of it, but they're doing the work in developing them. Your pastoral care team may have a training plan for pastoral care associates. That's included, but it's not, you don't have to put it in the same document, but reference it, that is part of the operational plan. So I talked about this a little bit. There's really 4 different types of operational planning that congregations typically do. The first is what I call static planning processes. We talked about this as the 5-year plan that you created, went through a big, huge task force project, got the whole congregation involved, lots of surveys, and then you created a wonderful planned document that was supposed to last 5, sometimes 7 years. And they almost never are valid past the first couple of years of the plan because the situation has changed. And there's no ongoing process of adapting that plan. Then there's rolling planning processes, which we're going to talk about next month, that is board or standing committee led and has a built-in process of regular review and adaptation of the plan. That once you have built the process, the planning process continues as a basic aspect of the work of the board and the congregation. There are also committee-led planning processes, and the congregations that do this, they don't really have an overall congregational operational or ministry planning process, but different committees have different planning processes that they do for their ministry area. And this can be very effective, and it's actually somewhat distributed. It's not what I recommend, but I have seen this plan be very effective. The reason why I don't recommend it is because those planning processes are not necessarily talking to each other. So a planning process in your faith development program may not be running in concurrence in similar ways with the planning process being done by your social justice programs. A lot of congregations that don't do intentional planning work at the board level or staff level, this develops by default. That those ministry teams are creating their own plans and planning process, but not coordinating those or communicating them well with each other. And then a lot of congregations, especially large congregations and some program-sized congregations, really have staff-led planning processes. So that can also be very effective, especially in the congregations such as those that are in Carver style policy governance, the more strict versions of policy governance that almost require that planning, especially operational ministry planning, be done by the board. I mean, be done by the staff and not by the board. So an example of some operational ministry planning processes that are not a overall congregational, like a static 5-year plan or a rolling 3-year plan. religious education curriculum rotation plan is, if your faith development says we're going to run through certain curriculum or certain topics in different age groups at different times, that is built in. And OWL works this way sometimes in some congregations. That plan is an operational ministry plan, right? And could be either on its own or could be folded in as part of a broader congregational operational and ministry plan. New member engagement plans is another one. The cycle at which you're going to have the different events that help integrate new members into your congregation and congregational life. Building use and rental plan. There's a lot of congregations have done some. This one's on the short term. This one can be either long term or short term, depending on its horizon. But how you're going to utilize your building for the fulfillment of your mission, doing intentional planning around that, can be this kind of an operational plan. So I'm going to shift to talk a little bit about long-range planning. Now, this is ones where the horizon is 5 to 25 or 30 years. And I've even saw one congregation had a 50-year plan for the maintenance of their building that I thought was fascinating. These are focused primarily on ensuring that the assets and the resources of the congregation that the congregation needs to fulfill those missions are available for the long term. Most long-range planning, and remember, your assets, as we talked about in the fiduciary section of this workshop series, this is assets in the broadest term. This is that your staff is an asset. So a 10-year plan for the development of your staff is a long-range planning in this sense. A 20-year building maintenance plan. One congregation I worked with had a plan, like a multi-year cycling plan for their garden, for their outside property space. The two keys for what I call long-range planning are: one, longer than the 3 to 5 year time period, and two, focused on developing, maintaining, and increasing the assets of the congregation necessary for the fulfillment of the mission. And this planning is almost always conducted by lay leaders. Usually, sometimes directed by the board, sometimes not, but it's the committees or the areas that are responsible. It can be a task force. For example, to create a 20-year building maintenance plan, you might put together a task force that some of the rake on Saturday people, but also some people that maybe there's a contractor in your congregation who has the contacts to be able to get good data about the space of your building. Maybe it's someone who's an architect who has experience putting together a task force to be able to create the initial 20-year maintenance plan and create a process whereby your building and grounds committee that really love to nail shingles on the roof and do things like that, that they could update it over time. But sometimes you might create a task force to be able to do that initial development of that maintenance plan. Long-term strategic, long-term planning around finances often works the same way. That you might create a task force to create the initial long-term financial plan, and then a process whereby your standing finance committee would continue to update the plan over time. So some examples, I named a few in the section there, was a 20-year building maintenance plan, a 10-year financial stability plan, staffing transition plan. And so if you're working with developing a planning process around this is a good conversation with your primary contact that can point you in the direction of some other congregations that have done similar things or some good practices in developing these kind of long-range planning processes for your congregation. And I want to highlight 99% of the time, doing long-range planning like this is not something the board directly does. It's something the board either tasks a currently existing ministry team or committee with, standing committee, or creates a task force to do. But they're doing that work. That plan would be presented to the board. And here's the reason why. Is because something like a 20-year building maintenance plan, it has implications for your 10-year financial stability plan. And it is the board that is the connective tissue, the central processing unit, that helps to make sure that all of those long-range plans are in concurrence with each other, that they make sense, that they're informing one another. And like I said, they may either be tasked, approved by some long-range planning processes might be approved by staff. I think the majority of them would need to be approved by the board. And when they are approved, they then become policy. So back to our session that we talked about the board's responsibility for policy. A planning process, a long-range plan or an operational plan, when approved by the board, is now a policy of the congregation. And that lets the staff be able to make decisions, operational ministry decisions, or lay leaders to make decisions based upon a plan that is approved by the board, because that's now policy. So the finance committee can then make decisions based upon the 10-year stability plan. The staff can make decisions based upon the building use plan. So and should have written elements that are shared with the board, updating a single location. I did that in the policy section. Getting all your policies, whether it's planning policies or whether it's other policies, governance policies, in one location and updating them there is really key. And not having them exist on the hard drives of every single former president of your congregation. So next month, I'm really excited. I've been teaching the 3-year rolling strategic planning process for about 7, 8 years now. And we are going to do it here because I've been doing it one-on-one with individual congregations who ask me or who do some specific governance training with me. And I really want to have it recorded. So we are going to offer it to you all, in part because I think it is a really valid way for congregations to be able to, congregational boards, to be able to center their work around planning for the future. But it also is it also is a thing that quite a few of our not quite a few, but a number of our congregations in Mid-America are doing, and reporting back to us how useful this process is, not just for planning for the future, but organizing the board's work and organizing the board's thinking about mission. And so for that, we're going to finish off with a couple of normal slides reminding you of some resources. The Board Foundations course, the annual board member training. Thank you, Chanel, for putting those links in the chat. And next month is Planning for the Future, the 3-year rolling strategic planning process. And I will now take us off share screen if I can remember how to do that. There we go. Thank you, Sharon. I think I get to hand it to you.
Thanks, David. My name is the Reverend Sharon Dittmar, and I am on staff here as a congregational life consultant. I am located in Cincinnati. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a white woman with long brown grayish hair and teal glasses. And in the background is a beautiful photo created by our administrator, Chelsea Krafka, and it is a redbud tree just blooming. It's a close-up. It's quite lovely. So we're going to head back into our breakout rooms in just a minute, where we're going to consider 2 questions. And Chanel's going to put them in the chat so that you have them. The questions are: round 1, what kind of planning for the future does your congregation do now? And number 2, what is one part of your congregation's ministry and operations that could use some planning in order to live your mission well over the next 3 years?
Welcome back. Welcome back. Hope you had a good time in your breakout rooms. My name is Chelsea Krafka. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a middle-aged woman of mixed race with light skin. And today I am wearing a green sweater. I am the administrator for the Mid-America region and a program specialist. As we come back from our breakout groups, I invite your primary contacts to share one takeaway that they had from your group discussion. And if you feel so moved, we also invite you now to share in the chat one learning that you are taking from our time together this evening.
Mary and I were in a dyad for that time, so there's not really group themes, but she and I did a little getting to know you more and a lot of talking about a particular situation in their congregation that I probably won't share in the large group here. But it was very useful to have the time to dive in a little bit, inspired by what David shared earlier.
Great. We had a big group in the pastoral size with us today and talked about where lots of congregations are engaged somewhere in the planning process, have doing listening or have done listening and now setting goals. A lot of, okay, these are like the two things that keep rising to the top in what we're hearing. So now who do we assign that to figure out whether that's the 20-year building plan or the next 6-month RE plan or the communication plan? How do we assign that to whom and how does that work? And how do we sequence that given the number of volunteers and the amount of energy that we have in our congregations? Another thing that came up is a couple of people mentioned like the annual budget and pledge campaign is a small planning cycle. How are we going to spend our money next year? What are we going to increase? What are we going to cut? That is absolutely a planning cycle that engages the congregation in participation. And that was mentioned a couple of times as well.
It's me again, Kiana Dene. I'm still in my black jacket, glasses, and my hair is down. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm in Ann Arbor, and I serve our small congregations, which I did not share earlier. I love me some small congregations, and I do that work with my friend Chelsea. Thank you for attending this evening, and to David for centering us on the board's role in planning for the future. We'll notify you by email when the recording is posted online in case you want to share it with other members of your board. We hope to see you back next month, April 8th, at the same time to explore a specific system of operation and ministry planning known as the 3-year rolling planning process. It's a lot of letters. In addition to this month's gathering, we invite you to check out other opportunities and programs on our website. Chanel is sharing all of those in the chat. Good stuff going on, leaders conversations, small congregation support. And so I want to make sure you know about those. They are up and coming and easy to register for. And if you can't attend, you can send somebody else on the team or on the board. We are grateful for your service to your congregation and to our UU faith. It is our honor to support you in your leadership. As we close, we extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of leadership that we bring to our shared living faith. We will carry and share this light until we are together again. Go now in peace. Dear ones, dear ones.